What's up, YouTubers, and welcome to 2023. Today we're going to take a look at the Grambeau knives Russ, designed by Kane Grambeau. I said Keith Grambeau in my kind of initial impressions video, but it's actually Kane, so sorry about that, mate. This is manufactured by Best Tech out of China. It sports a 3.5-inch blade of M390 Super Steel. It weighs 4.7 ounces, and it prices at $282 US. So we'll take a quick peek at this knife. It's kind of a basic drop point there with a nice little swedge on the top. But what is important to look at this knife is it is a frame lock with an overlay. Let me go ahead and close that. But if you take a look at this one, the frame does form the lock bar interface there. And but there's just this nice little overlay with texturing that is screwed on overboard. So what you get is the benefits of a frame lock. You know what benefits there are, basically the lock being integral to that slab of the frame, but you also get some of the benefits on this side of a liner lock. So for example, with a typical frame lock, you can't really do a left side flick with your thumb, but this one you can. So that's kind of jumping into one of the advantages of this that I'm jumping a little bit ahead on. Let's go ahead and start looking at this knife. In terms of some comparisons or alternatives in this price range, there's some Chinese alternatives. This would be the Adam Purvis design Xerx. I think this one was made by Best Tech. It might have been made by We Knives, though. Again, you're looking at similar kind of blade styles. They're both contoured in the hand, and they're kind of short and narrow in there. If you want a little bit taller one, but also contoured frame lock, the Ferrum Forge made, and this one is made by We. This is the Archbishop 3.0. So again, you're looking at that similar price range, and you have the contouring of that. So those might be two of the Chinese alternatives in that frame lock region that you're looking at. In terms of some American-made ones, let me go ahead and pull the Les George first. You can get the Les George without the Tonto blade, but that's a full titanium frame lock. Made in the USA, and it kind of has some similar lines. It does go for a little bit higher price. This one I think was $425. Who knows? Always check current prices to know what it's going to go for. But that's something that's kind of in a range that you could consider. I think you could also get a monochromatic Spartan Harsey folder, and there's also a smaller one with a 3.25-inch blade, so the blade's actually a smidgen shorter. This is the full size with the 4-inch blade, and I have the one with the special anodizing and the laser etching on there with the clockwork. So that does put it up a little bit higher price. But like I said, you could get the smaller one for about, I want to say it's $375 for the little bit smaller one, and that would give you that frame lock with thumb stud action. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and show the kind of a much higher end, a little bit tougher to get a hold of. That would be the Koenig Arius, the non-flipper Arius. That one, and I actually did want to go ahead and show just a couple of lines on this one. Because as I held this thing, that's one of the things I noticed is this kind of double finger groove here did kind of fit very similarly, to the Arius. So that's something to notice. If you've handled an Arius, that kind of front feels that way. And then last thing is I will go ahead and show, if you kind of just, let me go ahead and move the Arius away. If you just kind of look at those blades, cover that up, and you take a look at those blades, you do see kind of similar blade profile of the Spartan Harsey as well. And that top swedge and the way it drops down and even the jimping up here, kind of similar. I'm not saying this is a copy or anything. Great designs make their way through time. And this could be just somewhat of an amalgamation. So there are definitely some of those lines in there that you may not feel. I definitely kind of felt those two lines are similar. And the Koenig Arius, I don't know, it's $695, $750 now. It's a lot. So can't even, we'll just move on. In terms of the pros of this knife, really most of it comes down to what I think is excellent design. Really, just from a user perspective, it's really, really good. This, you can notice on this one it has 2 screws to take this apart. I will go ahead and link at the very end of this thing also the full disassembly. And it does come with a 4mm tool, which is very handy because you need that. I don't know how many people are sitting on a 4mm Allen wrench to take it apart, but it was so easy to take apart this knife. Really appreciated that. It does use ceramic bearings for the action, and the action is fantastic, actually. So, I will talk a little bit about left-handedness. Really, really good. Like I said, a lot of knives that are frame locks, you can't go ahead and use that the middle finger flick on the other side because your thumb's putting pressure on the lock bar, and this one does not because it has that nice overlay. Makes for really good. This one works really well on the thumb flip, as well as, or the thumb, as well as, sorry, the backside finger spidey flick. Yeah, really, really good. Kind of like that. It is very short and slim in pocket, so it's kind of a short knife and slim, so it fits in, you know, some pretty in with some smaller knives. It is a little bit thicker here though, so you know, this one with the contouring, and I kind of like that because it gives me a very solid hand feel, unlike some thinner knives. So in that sense, I kind of prefer that. Being a little bit thicker in the pocket, or a little bit thicker in the hand rather, not really good. So the thumb stud deployment I already talked about. This is partially ambidextrous. Like I said, the pocket carry is not necessarily, you know, you can put this in your left pocket, and if you can find a way to it, it deploys great left-handed and everything, but, you know, it just doesn't have that pocketability. We talked about the contouring on the frame, but if you take a look, there's also a good bit of milling on the inside. So yeah, that definitely takes some of the weight off of that. And even on this lock side, actually, wherever there's not that frame cut out, you can actually see that there's some milling on there to reduce that weight. And I really appreciated that. The Holy pivot, I just kind of love Holy pivots. We'll take a look. You can see me waving them to there, as well as actually the backside screw. Not only provides just kind of good symmetry of those two disassembly screws, but also you can use this as a lanyard hole. You know, I wouldn't on this one. It's big enough that I don't really need a lanyard on it. But if you did so want a lanyard, you can deck this sucker out, and paracord 550 fits just perfectly in there, so not a problem. And the last thing is the hollow grind and stonewash blade is very, very good. It's a great stonewash. The hollow grind is really good. It's not a super thin, you know, this isn't going to be like a TRM Atom super slicing knife or a, you know, Benchmade bug out. But you know what? It cuts very effectively with that hollow grind, and I really appreciated that. So a lot of great things going on the design on this one. You know, as far as the cons of this knife, this is one of those that you have to pre-order, and the pre-order lead time is a significant amount of time. This is not one of those that you're going to get in maybe not necessarily 3 months. In fact, these are sold out right now, but you can go to Grambeau Knives, do pre-order. I got mine in without problems. It's shipped all the way from China to Australia, and then Kane sent them on to the USA where I got mine. I think I don't know if there's restrictions on other countries for, you know, sending them or not, but it did make its way in. It was, oh gosh, it was at least 6 months, I want to say. So that might be a hangout for some people. And I do talk about this in the disassembly. There was a definite massive amount of pivot walk. So if you're, you know, most people that might be watching this know how to use blue Loctite, and you're going to have to, because the threads are actually quite large. They're very large threads. It's like, I call it like a wide threaded pivot screw, and the pivot walk on this thing was probably about every 20 flips or so. Or not flips, but deployments open and returns, and it would just slowly move the blade this way. And it never did rub. It almost rubbed, but I actually could start squeezing this in the frame. You could hear it kind of clicking in terms of moving the knife back. So the pivot walk, just know that you're going to have to do a little bit of that. Not a huge issue. And then for me, this is, I guess, the one design flaw I would say is this knife looks so beautiful. I mean, as it is, and it meets all the lines that I love in a good everyday carry, and can do a little bit more. But it has this, what I call this little cutout right up here. And I honestly think if the lines had just carried this straight across and not left that little triangular cutout there, it would have looked so much better, and it would have been more comfortable. If you take a look at this in the saber grip, it's not terrible, but your thumb doesn't need to rest solely on the blade. Makes me kind of feel like, I don't know, some of those super thin blades, I don't know, maybe like this one, where you basically have no you know, scales or handles on there. This is the Benchmade Altitude. I think if there had just, you know, add the 3 extra 0.3 ounces or whatever that would be, and just fill this out all the way across there, and I think it would make for a little bit better line in terms of the unity with the blade going into the handle there, as well as a little bit more comfort there. So, you know, I was like, oh, you know, I'd like to actually have some frame on that. You know, otherwise the jimping did work fine. So I know it seems to be somewhat of a nitpick, But when I was looking at this knife, I mean, I guess, you know what, let's just jump right into it. Overall, you know, would this knife have been in my top 5 of 2022, and or will it be in my top 5 of 2023, since I didn't yet quite do the review until 2023? The answer is likely, because it really meets all the lines that I love. It's got contouring, it's got milling, it's thumb stud, it's a frame lock, hollow grind, you know, it's a good size, just everything about it. And it really hits all my preferences. But, you know, would it have won? I don't know. I think if it had closed off that little triangle right there, this definitely would have been up in the top 2, I think, for me, for the knife of the year. So we'll just have to see if that grinds on me too much more this year. I don't know if it will or not, but hope this was of use. Like I said, I'll go ahead and link back to the disassembly at the end of this, and I appreciate likes and subscribe if you did enjoy this or have found it of use. Take care. Bye. So one of the things that this knife out of the box definitely, I won't say suffers from, but it's quite common, but it does in fact to a degree suffer from, is pivot walk. So if you take a look at this, after about 200 flicks open and closed, it ends up moving quite off center and almost to the point where, yeah, you can see it much better there, where the blade it's not rubbing, but it's almost rubbing, but it definitely impacts the action. Certainly the retraction back, where it just doesn't go back as well. And I won't say this is a drop shutty knife anyway, but it just impacts it. And what is essentially happening is the pivot is loosening. I'll go ahead and demonstrate just with a tightening of this. Again, this is the 4mm that comes with the knife. And if you just take a look, this is probably, let's go ahead and see about how much, after about 200 flicks, we'll just see how much it takes to get it back to centered. It's about just under a quarter of a turn. And you'll notice that it's basically perfectly centered now, the blade is. And the action takes on so, it ends up being so much better. You can kind of feel it. It's definitely very consistent and smooth throughout. So what I'm going to go ahead and do at this point in time is actually take the blade apart, disassemble this. So I will go ahead and edit this in, probably slap it at the back of the review video for this knife. I'm loving this knife. You know, this is definitely everything down my wheelhouse. But I'll go ahead and pull out everything on this. I think the only thing that's going to be necessary really is this 4mm Allen wrench that comes with it. I'm going to Loctite the pivot there. We're going to see how this works, both the pivot and that barrel spacer. You know, it's basically two screw construction here, very much like that. Doesn't look like I have to take off the pocket clip or anything. And if necessary, I'll go ahead and, you know, or probably I'll do it anyway, put a drop of oil on the detent ball as well as at the bearings there. So I may end up doing this time lapse, fast forward, I don't know. That's probably most likely. I'm just not very good at doing these really fast. I'm very methodical myself. I'll probably go ahead and clean stuff out in there too with a cloth and some rubbing alcohol here too. So let's go ahead and get started at this point in time.